Hi, 8th graders. So last time you read/watched, it was Act 1, Scene 5. Just a quick recap. It is Hanukkah, and they are celebrating this important holiday, even though it's different. And they all the annex members reminisce about what it used to be like. They talk about how aren't latkes this year. They talk about how the candles are a little bit different, and they talk about how there's not going to be presents. And Mr. Dussel gets yelled at because they're like, oh, like, he says, like St. Nicholas, where is he? Like St. Nicholas Day. And they're like, no, this is not Christmas. It's Hanukkah. It's different. But in the last scene, so scene 4, we saw that Anne is trying to be sweeter, and she really does deliver because Anne decides to make/get everybody individual presents, and she's the only annex member that does this. Super thoughtful, super sweet, and they're not just whatever presents, they're presents that make sense for every single person. So for Margot, she takes an old crossword puzzle book and she takes all the answers out of it, like erases them, and then gives that to her. And she also, with all of these gifts, gives a poem. So that's what she gets Margot. Mrs. Van Dan, she makes her this fancy shampoo, and she says that she uses toilet water for it. I don't want you to think that that's like actual water from the toilet bowl. Toilet water is an older term for like perfume. And Mrs. Van Dan is very touched by that and thinks that's very sweet. For Mr. Van Dan, who's been super cranky because he's wanted cigarettes, she actually hand rolls him a few cigarettes and he loves it. He just thinks it's the best. For Mrs. Frank, who, she doesn't necessarily get along with her mother, for Mrs. Frank, she gets her an IOU coupon. Maybe some of you have made your parents' or guardians' coupon books, but she says 10 hours of doing whatever you say. And people joke how they would want that because Anne sometimes can be a handful. Mr. Frank helps her with some of the presents, so he doesn't expect to get one, but what he does get is a muffler or a scarf that Anne knitted. And this is the scarf that we see in the first scene, actually. And that's the thing that makes him start crying. So it is a special gift to him. She gets Mushi. I don't have a Mushi, I'm sorry. She gets Mushi a ball of paper with a string attached, so like a little cat toy. She gets Peter a safety razor. So Peter is the only one that gets a real present that she doesn't make. She has Meep get it secondhand because he's starting to get a mustache. And then Mr. Dussel, her roommate, she gets earplugs so he won't be able to hear her nightmares and things like that. So those are the presents. That's a big thing. Peter and Mr. Dussel are fighting a lot in this scene. Like when Peter gets the mustache, Mr. Dussel's like, you could just put some milk on your upper lip and your cat could get rid of your mustache for you. Basically being like, you're not that manly. They also get in a fight because Peter pretends to bring Mushi in and Mr. Dussel is allergic. And so they're fighting about that. And then he's happy because he has cigarettes, but Mr. Van Dan has been very concerned about food. So Mr. Dussel says, we should get rid of Mushi. And Mr. Van Dan is like, yeah, we should, because that cat is eating better than anybody else. So that's what we should do. Peter's super upset. And so Peter is actually, like, he falls off a chair and then a lamp falls. And then the annex members hear, like, running. And so they're all freaking out. Mr. Frank decides to go downstairs and they're all freaking out because they would have to wait all weekend to find out it's Saturday. And so freaking out. And then he comes back up and he said, yeah, we've been robbed by a thief. And everybody is like, all right. Mrs. Van Dan's like, okay, well, things are going to be okay. And Mr. Dussel is like, he's really the Debbie Downer in this. He's like, are you kidding me? What if this thief gets caught? What if they are like, hey, tell us, give us information, and then he rats us out because he knows now somebody's hiding. And Mrs. Van Dan's like, what person is going to be like, I was robbing someone, and then I am going to tell you, like, that they're, like, who would admit to a crime? Mr. Dussel is saying if he gets caught, he will give us up, so he will get, a lesser punishment. And Mr. Frank does what he does best, which he gives a pep talk and says to everybody, like, we're going to be okay. And they sing the Hanukkah song that you heard in the video if you watched the video version. And that is what happens at the end of Act 1, Scene 5. And that is how Act 1 ends. So we will be doing Act 2 this next little bit. Bye.